Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. On my last video, I gave you a little tour of what my knife collection looks like today and gave you a little background as to why I'm into knives and why I'm into sharpening now. So today I thought what I would do is give you a tour through my story in sharpening and then also what my sharpening collection looks like now that it's grown a little bit. Kind of walk you through where I started and give you an idea of where I'm at now. So with that being said, I'll quickly revisit the story that I kind of told you about knives and what got me into knives because it's the same story that got me into sharpening. So I had a knife a long time ago. It ended up being one of my favorite knives, and unfortunately it kind of got stuck in a rainstorm while I was on a motorcycle trip and never got the opportunity to thoroughly dry out. As a result of that, that knife ended up basically rusting away to nothing. I mean, the rust on the knife had completely eaten away the edge and there was surface rust all over it. Embarrassed and unsure of whether or not I was going to be able to restore the knife and bring it back into something that would actually be functional again, I asked my friend who was really into knives at the time if he had any thoughts or ideas on what could be done for it. And he offered to take it and see what he could do in order to restore it and then gave it back to me. It came back almost in perfect condition. I mean, there was still a little bit of patina on the knife, but he had completely restored it as far as being a functional tool again and put a razor sharp edge on it. I was so intrigued on how he was able to do this and I'm so impressed with the condition of the knife that I started asking how he did it. And it turned out he was able to do everything on just a tiny work sharp guided field sharpener. I thought it was so cool that he was able to do that I was interested in getting into it a little bit myself. And so I asked him what he thought I should start out with. And he said that the guided field sharpener was kind of the first step into the sharpening world. So I went out and for $40 bought myself a guided field sharpener and just absolutely had a heyday in my house with all the knives I had. It has a good grip progression for being able to do just about anything on a knife that you need to do, whether it's reprofiling, repairing, or just sharpening, and even refining the edge to a very, very good finish because it comes with a couple of ceramic rods on it. Ultimately, it ended up leaving me wanting a little bit more, maybe some larger stones and just a more versatile system overall. So my next journey into the sharpening world was a work sharp bench stone system. We'll revisit a little bit on the guided field sharpener. I've currently given it to a friend so that he can start practicing sharpening some of his own things and some of his tools around the house. So I don't have it with me today. This just kind of seemed like the next logical step. So I really kind of learned that over time I value being able to control the sharpening process with my own hands, right? So not necessarily using like a fixed angle system or, a belt sharpener that has guides on it or whatever right out of the gate. I really like the ability to sit there and have that tactile feeling over how my knives are doing in the sharpening process. And also it kind of gives me a little feeling of like a positive feeling afterwards. This is more of like a product of my skill rather than, something that I just attached to like a fixed angle sharpening system and just went ham on. Anyway, like I said, I moved on to the Work Sharp bench stone. And I think that this is a really, really good sharpener for anyone who wants to casually sharpen basically anything in their house. The bench stone has a lot of really cool features about it that I really value when it comes to sharpening, especially when you're getting just started out in the sharpening world. So, out of the box, it comes with a couple of these guides. You have a 20-degree side and a 25-degree side. And having guides is nice when you're starting out. A lot of people will say that it's really important to learn how to freehand sharpen early and just kind of build that muscle memory. But if you're nervous about, messing with higher end knives or, you don't want to mess up, maybe you don't have very many knives to practice on or something, you don't want to mess them up. I think that working with guides when you're first starting out can be really, really helpful because it helps you keep a consistent angle. Now, the thing with guides on a hand sharpener like this is that they aren't accurate. So, based on the spine thickness of your knife, when you lay it on the guide, it's actually going to be at a different angle than what the guide says it's at because of the thickness and the taper that the edge has, or the taper that the grind of your knife has. While I do recommend guided sharpeners for like a beginner system, just know that as you use them, even though you'll be keeping consistent angles, those angles may not necessarily be accurate to what is specified on the guides. Depending on the knife that you're sharpening, a 20-degree guide might actually end up putting like a 23-degree angle on the edge of your knife. So it's not going to come out as sharp as what the guides would lead you to believe. But regardless, I still think that there's a lot of value in a system like this, just because it's helping you keep that consistent angle. The other things that I really liked about this system is that it had a similar grit progression to the guided field sharpener. So you can see here that I have the 320 grit on top right here. It's similar to a lot of their fixed angle systems. They have this kind of tri-abrasive design, I think is what they call it, but you essentially just rotate it and then you're gonna get another grit. So it goes from a 320 to a 600. And then from there, you get this fine ceramic side, which a lot of people chalk up to being around a 1500 grit. I think that that is a really good grit progression. It's going to give you the ability to get razor sharp edges on the majority of your knives. And I have even been able to get a lot of like hair whittling edges using this system. And I used this system for a really long time. This has seen a lot of use and it hasn't worn out. The rotation of this thing is a little bit stiff, but it is still in great shape and the stones still do a lot of cutting. The other thing I will say about this system and a lot of Work Sharp products in general is that I think maybe the grit that's advertised on the stone is actually a little bit finer than what the stone says it is. So, it says this is a 320 grit stone. I think that this is probably more akin to like a 400 grit stone. And then the 600 is probably something closer to like an 800. And then honestly, the ceramic side, I know I said that a lot of people say that this is around 1500, but I've been able to get some really, really good polishes on my knives just using this ceramic. So I think that the grit on the ceramic, or whatever the grit rating equivalent would be, is quite a bit higher than the 1500 grit that's advertised on it. A couple of other cool things about this. First of all, you can get additional guides. So you can just buy these from the Work Sharp website or Amazon or wherever you can find them. But this allows you to really start getting some crazy edges on things like kitchen knives or pocket knives. So, the ones that come in the box are a 20 and 25 degree combo. The additional ones that you can buy are a 15 and 17 degree combo. So, that makes it to where if you're using the 15 degrees, you're really probably getting something like a 17 degree angle on your knife, not an actual 15 degree, but a 17 degree angle is like a really, really good angle for a lot of kitchen knives, especially if you have a Western style kitchen knife. You're probably looking somewhere in the like 17 to 20 degree range. So these guides are going to be what you want in order to start doing some kitchen knives and things like that. A couple of other cool additional things on this sharpener. It has this sort of lock on it, and when you unlock it, it allows it to actually rotate. So as you sharpen, it gives you the ability to actually follow the curvature of your knife and be sure that you're actually getting the tip by using this mechanism instead of forcing you to, kind of pull your elbow up in order to get the tip at the end of your stroke. I never really use that a whole lot, but when you unlock it, you can pull this entire like cassette out. And then once you do that, all you have to do is remove a screw on the end cap on each end, and you can start removing and replacing these stones. One thing that I wish that they offered on this sharpening system is more grits that you can buy in addition to what comes in the box. So right now you can, go to the website, you can buy other stones, but it's only going to be replacement stones for what comes in the box. You can't really buy any other grits for this, especially since I think the sizing on the stones for these is kind of odd. But yeah, if you're into other knife channels, Outdoor 55 just posted a video somewhat recently about how high quality he believes the stones are that comes in these Work Sharp systems. And I would say that holds true. This system has reprofiled and sharpened a lot of knives. And when I first got into it, I was eager to practice on anything I could. So, I was practicing on knives that literally had no bevel left and they were just completely rounded off. And it did take some time, but I was able to reprofile those knives and get them super sharp on this system. So I really like this system. It still lives on my workbench here, but I have moved on to some bigger and better things, hopefully. The other cool thing about this system is it can open you up into the world of freehand sharpening. So, while it does have the guides there that you can use as a safety blanket, it is big enough that you can, use the guide maybe to set your original angle, and then you can just go back and forth on the stones as you would if you're freehand sharpening without resetting the angle every stroke. So this is a really good introductory system to get you into freehand sharpening. Now, I use this system pretty much solely probably for about a year, and finally decided I was going to get some bigger and better stones. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, I'm kind of trying to start a sharpening service that I'm running on the side, like kind of as a side gig. I feel like I've got to a point now with getting good edges on knives and things that I'm ready to start doing it for other people. And I feel pretty confident being able to get other people's knives sharp without completely destroying the bevels or making them look weird or something like that. So I can deliver a really good, pretty professional edge on most knives that I touch now. And like I said, that came from, a lot of them came from this Work Sharp bench stone. But in order to be able to do knives for other people in an efficient way that makes sense in like a time versus money situation, I had to move on to some bigger and better things. So the next thing that I got was this DMT Duo Sharp Combo Stone. And this stone has some mixed reviews. I went ahead and bought the base with it because I didn't have a base for my stones. And this was my first kind of like larger 8x3 freehand sharpening stone that I was getting. So my intention was, and we'll get to it in a minute, but I also got the Work Sharp Ken Onion Mark II belt sharpener. And so my intention was to basically do rough touch-ups and things on the belt sharpener, kind of reprofile on the belt sharpener on the rougher grits, and then move on to this Duo Sharp stone in order to finish knives. So the one that I have here, and it sounds kind of silly to start with this, but the one that I have is a 600 1200 grit combo stone. So it's 600 on the red side, 1200 on the green side. I do like this stone. I will say it took some time to break in, and before it got completely broken in, some of the grit that had to be worn off of it in order to get it to a broken in state would be so aggressive that it would hang up the edge of your knife while you're going through your stroke. And so that made me really, really nervous at first. The other thing about these stones, I kind of wish that I would have taken more time before I bought my first freehand sharpening stone. And the reason is because I'm not real crazy about this kind of waffle pattern on the stones. It just feels a little bit less efficient than using a stone that's fully coated in diamond grit, because there's much less actual cutting surface on this stone than there is on a continuous stone that is 100% covered in your cutting material. That being said, however, it doesn't seem like there's any grit contamination on these from what I can tell, especially when I move up to like the 1200 side. It refines the entire scratch pattern and doesn't leave any deep scratches or anything like that in the edges of my knives. And it gives you a much larger work surface to work on than something like the Work Sharp bench stone. So for that reason, I think that this is still a pretty good stone. I still use it pretty much every time I hit a knife on stones. And this base is actually, pretty nice as well. I just wish that I would have gone with maybe something like the Dia Sharp instead of the Duo Sharp, because the Dia Sharp doesn't have that weird waffle pattern. It gives you a little bit more cutting surface on your stone than the Duo Sharp does. But this is still a pretty good stone. I like it. I like using it. It kind of creates a sound when you draw the knife across the surface here, because you can hear it gliding over all of these kind of holes in the cutting surface, and that's satisfying. It kind of, I don't know why it's satisfying, but it is satisfying to hear that. But yeah, pretty decent stone. I think that the stone and the base altogether cost me about $100. So, not too bad. The problem that I ended up finding though, like I said, I had bought a Ken Onion Mark II belt sharpener, and that sharpener is very, very good, I will say. But when you get into some of your more premium steels that are really, really hard, those belts do struggle to cut through some of the steel. So when it comes to like reprofiling and repairing damage and stuff, it can still be really beneficial to use a diamond stone in order to do that. And sometimes your diamond stones will cut and reprofile and repair even faster than a belt sharpener will, depending on the steel type that's being used. I decided to kind of revisit the sharpening stone situation, and the next stone that I got is the Sharpall. It has a part number, but basically what you need to know is that it is the 325 on one side and 1200 on the other side. And it comes with this little base slash storage case. And so here's the stone, and then it comes with this base and storage case. This stone is awesome. And this is what I wish that I would have got instead of the DiaSharp stone. It has this continuous cutting surface. So like if we put them side by side, like you can see how much more cutting surface is on the Sharpall stone than what's on the DuoSharp. And you know, nothing against DMT. DMT makes stones that are similar to the Sharpall here. I just didn't have the wherewithal to go that direction. I also was trying to support my local knife shop, and these were the only stones that they had. And you know, being DMT, I knew that they wouldn't be bad stones. I just wish that maybe I would have held off and got something like this first. Regardless, whenever I'm sharpening knives now, I'm using both of these stones in my progression. So, you know, I'll start out on this 325 side, and it cuts through steel really fast. It reprofiles really quickly. You have a lot of cutting area here. And going from this Work Sharp bench stone on a 320 grit to this Sharpall 325 grit, just the size of the stone helps cut through material so much faster than I could on my older Work Sharp system. So really like this system. It's great. You know, what I'll generally do in my workflows now is I will pull up my initial burr on the 325 grit. I'll minimize that burr. If I'm wanting to go straight to like a 1200 grit finish, then I'll just flip this stone over. I'll finish the knife on the 1200 grit, and then we're good to go. And I'll strop from there. If I want to finish my knife on a coarser edge, then I will generally move from the 325 over to my DuoSharp, and I'll finish it out on this 600 grit. Or if I still want to go to a 1200 grit and I just really want to refine that edge and stuff and go through probably more grit progressions than what I need to go through, then I will go from the 325 Sharpall stone to the 600 DuoSharp and then flip this and do the 1200 grit finish. So it's been fun to experiment with edges and stuff on different grits using this system. I think in the stone world, what's next on my list is I will probably get either like a 120 grit stone or a 220 grit stone so that I can reprofile and repair edges even faster than I can with my 325. Or I'll go completely on the opposite end of the spectrum and I'll probably get into a couple of really fine grit whetstones. I really want to get like a 5000 grit whetstone. I just don't know if I need to have something in between my 1200 diamond grits and a 5000 whetstone grit in order to get that edge really refined. And if that's the case, then maybe I'll go like 2000 to 5000 or something like that. But yeah, I'm ready to start experimenting with even, you know, finer edges. Getting like a 5000 grit edge on a knife sounds like a really fun time. And it's really cool, I think, some of the finishes and stuff that you can get with those. So yeah, that's what's next on my list as far as stones go. I will either go really high grit or I'll go really, really low grit just to make, you know, repairing knives and reprofiling knives that much faster than it already is. So that's kind of been my stone progression over time. I started on the Work Sharp guided field sharpener, moved on to the Work Sharp bench stone. All in all, you're in those two systems for less than $100 and you can start building up some really, really good skills for that kind of money. And you also get some pretty high quality abrasives when you do it. And like I said, with the bench stone, you also can add more guides so that you can make that system even more versatile. So I think that's a really good place to start. And then from there, I just kind of got into some larger 8x3 freehand stones, and that's been going well as well. So, you know, with all of the systems that I've talked to you about so far, all of those stones, I've been able to achieve hair whittling results. There is not a knife that I've done that can't shave there are a select few knives that I've done that can whittle hair off of any of those systems. So any of those systems will get you a sharp edge if you're just trying to get into it, and all of them will help you get into sharpening for like less than $100. Moving on to some kind of, I would say, specialty sharpening tools and situations. So before we move on to the belt sharpener, I'll show you this like jig that I made right here. So as I started, trying to market a sharpening service, I had some people starting to reach out about kind of some oddball things. So, initially I was just advertising, hey, I'll sharpen knives for a fee, whether it's kitchen knives, pocket knives, happy to do all of them. But I had some people reaching out for some kind of oddball things. And one of those oddball things is hair clippers. Now, hair clippers are kind of ground in a convex way. So, if you imagine two blades, they're like this, right? They're convex. So only the back and the tips are supposed to be touching. And that presents an interesting sharpening challenge. And there are sharpeners out there that are made for these things that are, upwards of $1,500. And basically, the reason for that is because it's made to maintain that convex angle on those blades. So I did a little bit of research and, watched some videos and things. I know that, instead of buying a $1,500 sharpener, I would just tell someone that I can't do it. But I started working on some of like the hair clippers that we have in our house and came up with this solution. So this is a convex jig that I made, or it's made to restore convex edges at least. So what I've got is a couple pieces of aluminum, because I figured if you prop a piece of metal up in the middle, it's going to have a curve out to the end. So it's screwed down to the board here, and then there's something propped up in the middle here so that I have that curve that can maintain that convex angle. And I did some research to see what that angle was on the actual sharpening systems, and this is pretty close to that. And then this is just some sandpaper on top. I don't do this very often, but at least I'm set up to be able to touch them up if I need to, or if someone asks me to. And all I have to do is replace the sandpaper on top here. So that's kind of an interesting one that I've put together for that. The other thing that people have asked me to start sharpening, and I think that this is really marketable given that it's springtime and it's time for people to start cutting grass again, is lawnmower blades. I'll just tell you the next thing on the list here is the Ken Onion tensioner. The Ken Onion Ken Onion Mark II. I think I'm missing a part of the name in there, but you get the idea. This is the version 2 of the Ken Onion belt sharpener that Worksharp has come out with. So I got the Elite version, mostly because I was most excited for the blade grinding attachment. And it also comes with this cassette right here. And then the cassette also has some angle guides on it that you can put on it or remove. Like I said initially, this is what I decided to get in order to more quickly be able to sharpen and touch up knives, or just give like a basic sharpen to a lot of knives. And so I practiced a lot on our knives. I practiced on some friends' knives and stuff, and it was really, really good. Worked through knives very quickly. I was able to get some surprisingly sharp edges. And the thing about this sharpener is that, most belt sharpeners will put a convex edge on your knife. In that regard, a convex edge is a little bit stronger than like a hand sharpened straight edge. And so I think that this sharpener is really, really good at producing some of the most stable edges I think I've ever felt. They're not quite as sharp as the knives are when they come off of the stones, but I can just tell when I'm using them, I'm very confident that it's not going to chip out or anything like that. It's just a very stable, very strong edge. And the grip progression that you get in the belts that come in the box is so good that you can end up with mirror polishes on a lot of your knives. This has been a really cool system, but what I found myself using this most for in offering services to people is sharpening lawnmower blades. I'll be honest, the system is a little bit underpowered for sharpening really thick pieces of steel like that. In fact, the best luck that I've had is by putting this cassette back on, removing the angle guides from that cassette, and then just running like a slack, really coarse belt on this cassette. And I found that because the belts flex so much whenever you're sharpening a big piece of steel that I think that the spring tension on this, in order to keep the tension on the belts as you sharpen, is a little weak. So it causes the belt to deflect a little bit too much. As I've been sharpening mower blades, I'm actually kind of holding this tensioner down to make sure that there's good tension on the belt to produce a good edge on those blades. And I've been pretty successful in doing that. The thing about this though is that it's a much slower process than a lot of other types of like mower blade sharpening. So, you know, I think that my next progression in the electric tools is going to be like a bench grinder, so that I can quickly repair a mower blade or something, and then maybe I'll finish it up on the belts on the Ken Onion belt sharpener. And that'll put a really good, like polished, pretty edge on mower blades, and they should also be theoretically a little bit stronger because it is going to convex that edge just a little bit. That is the majority of my bigger tools and things that I use for sharpening now. Again, I just started out with like less than $100 in, you know, work sharp stones, basically. Moved up the road with some other stones, then got the Ken Onion Mark II Elite, and that's been amazing. The other thing, kind of the last step in the sharpening process, and the last thing we'll talk about in this video, are my strops. You can imagine I had a buddy, these are homemade strops. I had a buddy give me these and he wrote a funny message on there. I don't really remember what it says, but just know that if this board wasn't cut, I probably couldn't put it on camera. But anyway, yeah, he gave me one double-sided strop and I cut it in two and turned it into two different strops. So I've got two different grits on here. For a long time, I was just using the stropping compound that came in my WorkSharp systems. So WorkSharp sells, I think, 3 different stropping compounds. They're all these little cubes. I actually have them right here. They're all these little cubes of like stropping kind of paste almost. So this one is chromium oxide, and then I want to say that this white one is like aluminum oxide or something like that. I think that the white one is supposed to be 1.5 micron, the green one is supposed to be 0.5 micron. The problem with these is that for your more premium steels, they don't cut as well as diamond material. So I recently got a couple of diamond emulsion compounds, and so I've got a 4 micron and a 1 micron diamond emulsion compound that I'm using on these strops. I have one here with a piece of leather that's a little bit rougher. It's not quite as smooth. I put my 4 micron compound on this strop right here. And boy, can I tell the difference between that and like the chromium and aluminum oxide. It cuts very, very well. And when I pull knives straight off of this strop, they are very, very sharp and bitey. So when you touch them or put them on anything, it just wants to dig in. If you want to take your edges up to that kind of next level of refinement, then you can use like a 1 micron or less compound. And this just puts a really, really good finish, gets your edge up to that last level of refinement that you're going to get in order to achieve like hair whittling sharpness. That is pretty much my entire sharpening collection up to this point. Like I said, there are a few things that are on the list for me to get in the future, but I'd like to make a little bit of money back before I start buying even more sharpening equipment. But yeah, for now, the next things on my list are going to be like a really fine grit whetstone, maybe an even coarser grit diamond stone, and then maybe like a really cheap bench grinder that I can just use to quickly repair like big pieces of steel, like a mower blade or something like that, and then I'll finish them up on the belt sharpener. So yeah, started on the WorkSharp guided field sharpener. That system is great if you're just wanting to get into it or you want to have something to throw in a backpack. The issues with that system is that it's a little bit limiting. You only get the 20-degree guides, and like I said with guided systems, that angle is actually probably going to be a little bit higher than what that 20-degree guide indicates. So it is a little limiting in that regard. You only get the 220 grit and the 600 grit. And then I think that the ceramic rods on it are even like kind of hard to use because they're rods instead of plates. But it's a great system to start out on, especially if you're just wanting to get into it and see if it's something that you're going to like. From there, I wanted something that was a little less limiting, so we went to the Worksharp bench stone. This offered a lot more versatility in that, mostly the grit progressions are the same, but you get a ceramic plate that you can use in order to really produce some good finishes on your edges. You can also swap out the guides for more guides that they sell in order to start experimenting with different edge angles and stuff, and that's really cool. And then it's just super easy to take apart. You can clean your stones, kind of refresh your system, and do that kind of thing. As an added side benefit, if you buy the upgraded guides or the additional guides for this, they are all also interchangeable with Worksharp's whetstone system. So, if you wanted an introduction into a cheap whetstone as well and wanted those cool, good angle guides, then you can do that with the bench stone and the whetstone system kind of collaboratively. The next thing on the list was actually the Ken Onion Mark II. And like I said, I had planned to use that mostly to do all my heavy lifting on an edge and then finish it on this DMT DiaSharp 600-1200 combo stone. And like I said, I ended up kind of realizing that that wasn't going to work. So then went over to a coarser grit Sharpall diamond stone. And then we just kind of upgraded the strops and things from there. Really happy with where my sharpening's at now. It's very, very rare that when I sharpen a knife now, I don't get it to hair whittling sharp. And that feels really, really good. For a while there, I was not very confident in the edges that I was putting on knives. And now I can say, if I sharpen a knife for you, it's gonna come back in really, really good shape. And it's probably gonna come back to you sharper than that knife has ever been in its life before, unless I've already sharpened it before that. I hope you enjoyed this tour through kind of my sharpening progression, where I started, where I'm at now, where I want to be in the future. And I hope this gave you a little bit of insight into what it takes in order to start getting into sharpening. And honestly, the answer to that is really not that much. You can get a really good system for starting to get into sharpening for less than $50, and that's pretty awesome. And you can get some really, really good edges off of something like that. If you're still here, thanks for checking out this video. Thanks for walking through my sharpening kit with me and getting a little nerdy about some of that stuff. I hope to do maybe some like real-time sharpenings and stuff in the future, let you know what I'm looking for while I'm going throughout the sharpening process in order to get good edges. But for now, if you liked this video, hit the like button, and as a brand new channel, I could really use some new subscribers. So if you like this and you want to see more content like this, give me a subscribe. Thanks.